of Sentinel Comics is linked to that of St. Louis, the city in which it was born. Sitting on the west bank of the Mississippi River, St. Louis was a busy industrial center in the 1930s, home to companies like the brewer, Anheuser-Busch, who had to switch to selling non-alcoholic beer and yeast when alcohol sales were prohibited in the U.S. starting in 1920. St. Louis was also home to a dozen different gangs at the beginning of Prohibition. One of the most notable families was the Cattaneos, led by family patriarch and capo Dominic. The Cattaneos ran booze and numbers rackets, they provided protection for local businesses, and even occasionally robbed a freight train or two. Dominic's daughter Julia was the light of his life, and when she brought home the boy she wanted to marry, Dominic was ready to make him a full-fledged mobster. But this boy, Roberto Tucci, wasn't exactly what he was expecting. Soft-spoken and mild-mannered, Bob Tucci was more of an accountant than a leg-breaker.
He put me in charge of the newsstands. The Cattaneos owned that business in St. Louis, and it wasn't exactly a big job. Mostly you just collected a piece from the newsstand sellers, and another piece from the older kids who organized the younger kids, who were the ones who'd take a sack of papers out to the corner and yell and collect their nickels and dimes. Dominic figured I could at least handle a bunch of old newsstand guys and kids anyways. I learned pretty quickly how newsstands made money and what sold. Papers, magazines, pulps. Comic books were just starting up. And there was this printer that had borrowed a bunch of money from the Cattaneos and lost it, so the family wound up owning this printer that printed pulps. They gave it to me to run until they got around to selling it off. And I convinced them to switch over to publishing and printing comics. And it started to make money, so Dominic decided not to sell it off after all. It was really that easy.
The Cattaneo family took over Sentinel Publishing in 1935 and began creating comic books in 1936. Their first titles were primarily carried over from their previous pulp titles: Men's Adventure, Girls Adventure, and Funny Animals.
I got a job with Sentinel at the end of 1938. They had started buying strip collections from the packagers, but over the late 1930s, they had started producing comics in-house and were shorthanded. There were about 5 of us there, all kids. And then Bob Tucci and his wife Julie, who was kind of the den mother for all of us.
By early 1940, Sentinel had become a modestly successful publisher of comics, taking advantage of both the St. Louis print shop that Cattaneo also owned and the desire of the mob to have a handy legal business that they could launder their less innocent cash flow through. Tucci told his writers that he wanted a new title, dedicated to crime-fighting stories. Most of the initial pieces that his team submitted were for traditional lawmen, cops, detectives, Wild West sheriffs. One, submitted by Harvey Brooks, was for a superhero.
Legacy wasn't the first superhero. GR Comics had Centurion by then, and Hero Comics had Optimus and a couple more. I wanted to do something a little different. I called him Legacy because he was the latest in a whole family of heroes, going back hundreds of years. Paul Parsons is a soldier, not a vigilante. He's a patriot. He loves his country. He doesn't have a secret identity. He has a civilian identity that not everybody knows. He's dedicated his life to fighting those who would endanger America.
Legacy and Justice Comics were a hit from the beginning and just got bigger with each monthly issue that came out. By August, it was selling 250,000 copies per issue nationwide, and it became Sentinel's biggest selling title. Tucci went to Hollywood with the support of the Cattaneos to try to get some movies made. He met with Republic Pictures, who specialized in adventure serials. The Legacy serial debuted in theaters nationwide in April of 1942, starring Rod Cameron as Legacy, with Marguerite Chapman as government agent Caroline Blake and William Hottie as the villainous Admiral Zahn. It ran 12 episodes. It was a smash hit. By the time it came out, though, America had finally entered the war, and the lives of everybody at Sentinel Comics were about to change.